He didn't follow the command, and that was the moment everything stopped making sense. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from tonight? Somewhere quiet, I hope. Somewhere you can hear your own thoughts. Because this story isn't about what you see, it's about what you feel before you understand it. The desert air hangs dry and still, stretching for miles under a pale sky just beginning to fade into dusk. Heat radiates off the sand in slow waves, the kind you don't notice until your body starts to feel heavier than it should. Staff Sergeant Daniel Hayes stands with his unit at the edge of a silent stretch of terrain, boots pressed into the dust, eyes scanning the horizon like he's done 1,000 times before. His uniform is worn but precise, sleeves rolled, collar stiff, every detail in place. Discipline lives in his posture. Order lives in his breath. And beside him, perfectly aligned at his left leg, sits Rex. A German shepherd with a sable coat that catches the fading light like burnished bronze. His ears are upright, alert. His amber eyes move, not nervously, not randomly, but with purpose, like he's reading something no one else can see. Rex was trained to follow commands. Every step, every pause, every reaction drilled into muscle memory through repetition and reward. Sit. Stay. Search. Return. There's no room for hesitation in that system. No space for interpretation. Daniel believes in that system. He always has. It's what keeps men alive. It's what separates chaos from control. He glances down at Rex, gives a subtle hand signal. Move forward. The kind of signal that doesn't need words. Rex doesn't move. For a second, Daniel thinks he imagined it. The signal was clear. Rex knows it. They've done this dozens of times in training, in controlled environments, in real missions where timing meant everything. Daniel repeats the command, this time firmer, his voice low but edged with expectation. Go. The wind shifts slightly, carrying a faint scent of dry earth and something metallic beneath it. Rex's body stiffens, but not in obedience. In resistance. His paws remain planted. His gaze shifts, not toward the direction of the command, but slightly off to the side, focused on something unseen. Daniel feels it then. Not fear. Not confusion. Something quieter. A crack in certainty. Around them, the rest of the unit pauses, subtle glances exchanged without words. Seconds stretch longer than they should. Daniel's jaw tightens. A trained K9 does not hesitate. A trained K9 does not question. But Rex isn't questioning. He's choosing. And that isn't something training explains. Daniel lowers his hand slowly, eyes narrowing as he studies the dog beside him. Rex doesn't look back for approval. He doesn't seek reassurance. He simply stands there, steady, grounded, as if holding a line no one else can see. In that stillness, something shifts inside Daniel, not outwardly, not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough to plant a single thought that doesn't belong in a place like this. What if this isn't disobedience? What if this is something else entirely? The silence does not break all at once, it thins, like air before a storm you cannot see coming, and Daniel Hayes feels it settle under his skin, subtle but undeniable, the kind of shift that does not belong in a place built on certainty. He exhales slowly, forcing control back into his chest as he studies Rex again. The dog has not moved, not an inch, not a twitch, just standing there with that same fixed gaze as if something beyond the visible horizon is speaking to him in a language no human was ever trained to understand. Daniel straightens, his voice low but firm, measured the way it has always been when discipline needs to hold the line. Rex, forward. The command is clear, practiced, backed by years of repetition. It should work, it always works, but Rex does not respond. Instead his ears tilt slightly, catching something carried on the faintest thread of wind, something so small it would never register to a human mind trained to rely on sight and logic. Daniel feels a flicker of irritation rise, not anger, not yet, just the discomfort of something breaking pattern, around them the desert remains still, a vast stretch of muted gold and gray under a sky that is dimming by the second, the temperature beginning to drop just enough to bring a dry edge to every breath. One of the men behind Daniel shifts his weight, boots scraping lightly against the ground, a sound that feels louder than it should in the quiet. Daniel raises a hand slightly, signaling stillness without. Looking back, his focus locked on the dog beside him, Rex finally moves, but not forward, not toward the direction of the command. He takes a single step to the right, slow, deliberate, then stops again, his body angled now, placing himself between Daniel and something unseen. It is not random, it is not confusion, it is placement. Daniel notices it immediately, the precision of it, the intention. This is not a dog hesitating, this is a dog choosing position. Daniel's jaw tightens as he steps forward, intending to correct the behavior, to re-establish control, but as he moves, Rex lets out a low sound, not a bark, not a growl, something quieter, deeper, a warning that seems to come from instinct rather than training. Daniel freezes mid-step. The sound is not directed at an enemy, not at a threat he can see, it is directed at him, and that is what unsettles him most. Rex has never warned him before, never placed himself in opposition to a command, never stood in that quiet line between obedience and something else entirely. Daniel lowers his foot back to the ground slowly, his breath steady but his thoughts no longer aligned with the certainty he carried moments ago. He glances toward the direction Rex had refused to go. The terrain looks the same as every other stretch they have crossed, flat, open, unremarkable, no movement, no sound, nothing that would justify hesitation, and yet the dog remains unmoved, holding that invisible boundary like it matters more than any order ever given. Seconds pass, stretching into something heavier, something that presses against the edges of Daniel's understanding. He has trusted training his entire career, trusted the system, trusted that discipline and repetition could prepare a man and a dog for anything they might face, but standing here now, with Rex refusing to move and the air itself feeling different in a way he cannot explain, Daniel feels that belief shift, just slightly, just enough to let doubt in, and doubt is not something he has ever made room for. He looks down at Rex again, really looks this time, at the stillness, the focus, the absence of fear, and a thought forms, quiet and unwelcome, but impossible to ignore. Maybe Rex is not failing the training, maybe he is following something the training never taught them to see. The air does not move, but something changes inside it, subtle and unseen, like a line drawn across the ground that only one living thing can recognize. Daniel Hayes stands there with his weight balanced and his breath controlled, yet his certainty is no longer where it used to be. It lingers somewhere behind him, just out of reach. He watches Rex carefully now, not as a handler watching a trained animal, but as a man trying to understand another mind that does not speak his language. The dog's posture remains firm, not tense, not fearful, just anchored, as if the earth beneath his paws holds a truth that has not yet revealed itself. Daniel shifts his gaze again toward the open terrain, scanning slowly from left to right. The fading light softens the edges of everything, turning sharp lines into shadows, the kind of light that can hide small details, but not enough to justify what he is seeing, or rather what he is not seeing. There is nothing there, no movement, no sound, no visible threat, and yet Rex refuses to cross that invisible boundary. Daniel inhales through his nose, catching the dry scent of dust. And something faint beneath it, something metallic but distant, too faint to anchor to any real conclusion. Behind him one of the Marines speaks quietly, barely above a whisper, asking if they should proceed. The question hangs in the air longer than it should, because normally there would be no hesitation. Normally Daniel would answer immediately, command clear, direction set, but this moment is different, and everyone feels it. Even if no one says it out loud, Daniel does not turn around. He raises a hand again, signaling hold position, his eyes never leaving Rex. The dog finally shifts his head slightly, glancing up at Daniel for the briefest second, and in that glance there is no confusion, no apology, only certainty, a calm, grounded certainty that feels out of place in a situation built on human control. And that is when it happens, not an event, not a sound, but a realization. Quiet and immediate, Daniel understands that Rex is not reacting, he is anticipating. Whatever this is, whatever lies ahead, it has not revealed itself yet, not to human senses, not to trained eyes, but Rex already knows it is there, already chose not to move forward before anything could confirm the danger. Daniel feels a subtle tension ease in his chest, replaced not by relief, but by something more complicated, something closer to trust, but not the kind that comes from training, the kind that comes from letting go of control. He lowers his hand completely now, the signal no longer about command, but about acceptance. He takes one slow step back instead of forward, shifting his position beside Rex rather than ahead of him, aligning instead of leading. The movement is small, almost unnoticeable to anyone else, but to Rex it is everything. The dog relaxes just slightly, not fully, but enough to show that something has been acknowledged. Daniel speaks again, but softer this time, not a command, not an order, just a quiet statement carried into the still air. All right. And for the first time since this moment began, he is not telling Rex what to do, he is listening, really listening, to a silence that suddenly feels full of meaning, and in that silence, Daniel Hayes makes a choice that no manual ever taught him. He chooses to trust the pause instead of breaking it. The desert holds its breath, and for the first time, so does everyone else. No one moves, no one speaks, because something unspoken has already shifted in the space between command and instinct. Daniel Hayes stands beside Rex now, not ahead of him, not behind him, but aligned, as if the chain of authority has loosened just enough to let something older take its place. The fading light stretches shadows longer across the ground, turning ordinary shapes into uncertain forms, and the air carries a stillness that feels heavier than silence. It feels like waiting. Rex takes a slow step forward, not into the direction Daniel had originally signaled, but at a slight angle, tracing a path that curves gently away from that invisible line he refused to cross. His movement is quiet, deliberate, each paw placed with care, as if he is mapping something unseen beneath the surface. Daniel watches closely, then follows, not giving an order, not correcting the direction, just matching the pace, step for step. The rest of the unit hesitates for only a second before adjusting, falling in behind them, their formation shifting subtly, guided not by a spoken command, but by the quiet authority of trust being rewritten in real time. The ground underfoot changes slightly as they move, barely noticeable, a difference in texture more than appearance. The sand feels looser here, softer in a way that does not quite match the surrounding terrain. Daniel notices it now because Rex noticed it first, and that realization settles deeper than he expects. The wind brushes across his face again, carrying that same faint metallic trace, still distant, still undefined, but no longer ignorable. Rex pauses again, his head lowering slightly, nose hovering just above the surface, not touching, just sensing. His ears flick once, twice, adjusting to something Daniel cannot hear. The moment stretches. Not tense, but focused, like the world narrowing down to a single point of attention. Daniel stops beside him, his body still, his breath steady, resisting the urge to speak, because speaking now would break something fragile, something forming between them that does not belong to training or protocol. Behind them, one of the Marines shifts again, the faint sound of gear brushing against fabric cutting softly through the quiet, and Rex reacts instantly, not with alarm, but with a sharper focus. His body stiffening just enough to signal that whatever he is sensing is closer now, more defined. Daniel feels it too, not as a clear threat, but as a pressure, like standing at the edge of something you cannot see but know is there. He lowers his gaze to the ground ahead, studying it more carefully now, and there, barely visible, is a subtle disturbance, a pattern that does not quite match the natural flow of the terrain. Nothing obvious, nothing that would stand out unless you were looking for it, unless you already knew where to look. Daniel's chest tightens, not with fear, but with recognition, not of the object itself, but of the truth unfolding in front of him. Rex was never hesitating, he was guiding, never refusing, only redirecting. Daniel exhales slowly, the weight of that understanding settling into something steady, something calm. He reaches down without looking away from the ground and rests his hand briefly against Rex's shoulder, not as a command, not as praise, but as acknowledgement. And Rex does not look up, does not seek approval, he simply remains there, grounded in that quiet certainty, holding the line that no one else could see. And in that moment, Daniel realizes that training taught them how to move, how to respond, how to survive, but it never taught them how to listen to what cannot be explained, and yet that is exactly what is keeping them safe right now. The ground does not announce danger, it never does, it simply waits, quiet and unchanged to the untrained eye. But now Daniel Hayes is no longer looking with the same eyes he had minutes ago. he studies the subtle shift in the sand where Rex has stopped, the faint irregularity that should not be there, the kind of detail that disappears the moment you stop paying attention, and yet Rex had seen it without seeing it, sensed it before it revealed itself. Daniel slowly raises his hand behind him, not sharply, not with urgency, but with a calm, controlled motion that signals the unit to hold their position. Boots settle into place, gear goes still, even the air seems to respect the silence now forming around them. Rex lowers his body slightly, not in fear, but in focus, his nose hovering just inches above the ground, tracing an invisible boundary with careful precision, his breathing steady, measured, as if each breath is reading something written beneath the surface. Daniel crouches beside him, his movements slower than usual, deliberate, matching the pace Rex has set. He leans forward just enough to see what the dog has been trying to show him all along. The pattern becomes clearer now, not obvious, but undeniable once seen, a disruption in the natural flow of the terrain, subtle enough to escape attention, but deliberate enough to suggest intention. Daniel feels a quiet shift in his chest, not fear, not relief, something deeper, something that settles into respect, not for the situation, but for the instinct standing beside him. He does not speak right away, because words feel unnecessary here, almost intrusive. Instead he studies Rex again. The dog remains still, unwavering, as if holding that invisible line with absolute certainty, and Daniel realizes something that training never prepared him for. Rex did not hesitate earlier because he was unsure. He hesitated because he already knew. Daniel exhales slowly, the sound barely audible, and then he speaks, but not as a command, not as an order, just a quiet acknowledgement carried in a voice that has softened without losing its strength. Good call. Rex does not react outwardly, no wag of the tail, no shift in posture, just that same steady presence, as if praise is not the point, as if the work itself is all that matters. Behind them one of the Marines leans slightly to get a better look, curiosity pulling against discipline. Daniel raises his hand again, this time without turning, a silent instruction to stay back, to trust what they cannot yet fully understand. The light continues to fade, casting longer shadows across the ground, the temperature dropping just enough to bring a chill to the edges of exposed skin. The world feels quieter here, more focused, like everything unnecessary has fallen away, leaving only what matters. Daniel shifts his weight carefully, repositioning himself just outside the boundary Rex has marked, choosing not to cross it, not because he is told not to, but because he believes it now, truly believes that there is something there worth respecting, something that Rex has already accounted for. The wind moves again, softer this time, carrying that same faint metallic trace, but now it feels closer, more real, no longer a distant suggestion but a presence, and Daniel understands in that moment that this was never about disobedience, never about a breakdown in training. It was about awareness that exists beyond instruction, about a connection to the environment that cannot be written into a manual or drilled into repetition. He rests his hand briefly against Rex once more, not guiding, not correcting, just sharing the space, and in that quiet contact, something unspoken passes between them, not a command, not a response, but a mutual understanding that from this point forward, they are not simply working together, they are listening together, to something deeper than either of them could reach alone. The moment does not arrive with sound or warning, it settles instead like a quiet certainty that something unseen has already shifted into place. Daniel Hayes remains crouched beside Rex, his hand resting lightly against the dog's shoulder, both of them still, both of them listening in a way that goes beyond hearing. The desert stretches outward in every direction, empty and silent, but the silence no longer feels safe, it feels deliberate, as if it is holding something back. Rex lifts his head slightly, his ears sharpening toward a point in the distance that Daniel cannot yet define. The movement is small, almost imperceptible, but it carries weight, the kind of weight that comes before a decision. Daniel follows the direction of Rex's gaze, narrowing his eyes, trying to see what the dog already senses. The fading light makes everything softer, less distinct, but then he notices it, not movement, not exactly, more like a disruption in stillness, a subtle shift in the pattern of the land farther out, something that does not belong, something that would have gone unnoticed if they had continued forward as planned. Daniel feels his chest tighten slightly, not from fear, but from the realization of how close they came to missing it. He rises slowly to a standing position, careful not to disturb the balance of the moment. His voice when it comes is low, controlled, carrying just enough to reach the others without breaking the fragile calm. We adjust our path, there is no explanation, no need for one, the tone alone is enough. The unit responds immediately, shifting position with practiced discipline, but this time their movement follows a new center, not the map, not the original route, but the quiet line Rex has drawn through instinct alone. Rex steps forward again, guiding the direction with measured confidence, each step deliberate, each pause intentional. Daniel stays close, matching his pace, no longer leading, no longer directing, but trusting, fully now. The distance they cover is not far, maybe 20 yards, maybe less, but it feels longer, heavier, as if each step carries the weight of a decision that cannot be undone. And then the space behind them changes, not visibly, not in a way that can be clearly defined, but enough for Daniel to feel it, a shift in the air, a release of tension that he had not realized was there until it is gone. He glances back briefly, the path they almost took now sitting quiet and undisturbed, offering no sign of what it held, no evidence of what could have happened, just stillness, empty and convincing. Daniel turns forward again, his jaw tightening slightly as the understanding settles deeper. Rex did not just detect something, he prevented something. Something that would never have announced itself until it was too late to choose differently. The weight of that truth does not come with panic, it comes with clarity, a quiet, steady clarity that reshapes how Daniel sees everything around him. He looks down at Rex again, the dog moves with the same calm focus as before, unaffected by what just passed, as if this is simply what he does, what he has always done, not extraordinary, not heroic, just necessary. Daniel exhales slowly, the tension leaving his shoulders, replaced by something steadier, something grounded, respect, not just for Rex, but for the unseen layer of the world that the dog navigates without hesitation, without doubt. And in that moment, Daniel understands that training gave them structure, gave them discipline, but it is trust, real trust, that allows them to survive what cannot be predicted, what cannot be seen. And as the last light fades completely into the horizon, Daniel Hayes walks forward beside Rex, not as a handler giving commands, but as a man who has learned to follow something he cannot fully explain. And for the first time, that does not feel like losing control, it feels like finding something greater than it. The night settles fully now, not sudden but complete, wrapping the desert in a deep blue stillness where shapes blur and distances stretch longer than they are. The air cools against the skin, carrying a faint whisper of wind that brushes across the terrain like a quiet reminder that nothing here is ever truly empty. Daniel Hayes walks beside Rex with a different rhythm now, his steps no longer leading but matching, measured and steady. The unit follows behind them in silence, their formation tighter, more aware, as if they too have begun to sense that this is no longer a routine movement. No one speaks, not because they were told to stay quiet, but because something about this moment demands it. Rex slows slightly, his head lifting again, ears adjusting to the subtle layers of sound carried through the cooling air. Daniel notices how the dog listens, not just to what is present, but to what is missing, the absence of certain sounds, the quiet gaps that do not belong. And Daniel begins to understand that awareness is not always about detecting something new, sometimes it is about recognizing when something expected is no longer there. He glances across the landscape, the horizon now a dark line against a fading sky. And for a moment everything feels still again, almost too still. Rex stops once more, not abruptly, but with purpose, his body angled slightly forward, weight balanced, ready but not tense. Daniel stops with him, no hesitation, no second guessing, just a shared pause that has become its own form of communication. Seconds pass, stretching long enough for doubt to try and return. But this time it does not take hold, because Daniel has already crossed that line inside himself, the one between control and trust, and he is not going back. Rex shifts again, taking a careful step forward, then another, testing the space ahead as if confirming something only he can sense. Daniel follows without question, and as they move, the environment changes subtly once more, the ground firm slightly under their boots, the texture more consistent, more natural, as if they have moved out of something and into something safer without ever seeing the boundary itself. Daniel exhales quietly, the breath carrying a sense of release he does not fully acknowledge, but feels all the same. Behind him one of the Marines murmurs softly, barely audible, something about the route being different than planned. Daniel does not turn, does not explain, because there is no explanation that would make sense in the language they are used to. Instead he keeps moving, trusting that the result will speak for itself. Rex continues forward, his pace steady now, the tension in his posture easing just enough to show that whatever he had been tracking has been left behind, and that is when Daniel understands the full weight of what has happened, not in a dramatic realization, not in a sudden revelation, but in a quiet, grounded truth that settles into place. Rex did not just guide them around danger. He carried the awareness of it before it ever revealed itself. He made a decision without words, without orders, and Daniel chose to follow, and that choice changed everything. Daniel glances down at Rex again. The dog moves with the same calm certainty, unaffected by recognition, unaffected by praise, simply doing what he was meant to do, and Daniel feels something shift deeper than thought, something closer to belief, not in training, not in protocol, but in the bond that exists between them. A bond that does not rely on commands to function, a bond that lives in the space between instinct and trust. And as they continue through the quiet desert night, Daniel Hayes no longer sees Rex as something he directs, but as something he listens to, something he trusts in a way that cannot be measured, cannot be taught, only experienced, and in that understanding, the truth becomes clear, not spoken, not written, but known, that sometimes the ones trained to follow are the ones who see the path more clearly than those trained to lead. The desert no longer feels empty, it feels known, not because Daniel Hayes can see more, but because he has learned to notice what he used to ignore, the way the wind shifts before it reaches him, the way the ground carries subtle differences beneath his boots, the way silence itself can speak when something is out of place. Rex moves ahead with quiet confidence, no longer pausing as often, his path steady now, as if the unseen weight they avoided has been left far behind. And yet Daniel does not let his guard down, not in the old way, not through tension or control, but through attention, a different kind of awareness that feels less forced and more natural, like learning a language he did not know he could understand. The unit follows in a rhythm that has softened, not careless, not relaxed, but aligned, their steps quieter, their presence more deliberate, as if they too are beginning to trust something they cannot explain. Daniel glances up at the sky, now deep and wide above them, scattered with the first faint stars, the air cooler, cleaner, carrying the distant scent of dry earth and fading heat. Everything feels calmer, but not in a way that invites complacency, in a way that invites reflection. Rex slows again, but this time not out of warning, out of confirmation. He looks back briefly at Daniel, just a quick glance, but enough to say something without words, and Daniel understands it, not logically, not through training, but through the bond that has been quietly forming between them since the moment Rex first refused that command. Daniel nods slightly, a small gesture, almost instinctive, and in that exchange something settles fully into place, not doubt, not question, but trust, complete and unspoken. They continue forward together, not handler and dog, not leader and follower, but partners moving through a world that reveals itself differently to each of them. Daniel begins to replay the earlier moment in his mind, not with tension, but with clarity. He sees it now for what it was, not a failure of obedience, but a choice made with certainty, a decision rooted in something deeper than repetition, something that cannot be taught in drills or written in manuals. He exhales slowly, the breath steady and grounding, and for the first time, he allows himself to accept that there are parts of this work that do not belong to human control, parts that exist in instinct, in connection, in something that feels almost like intuition but sharper, more precise. Rex continues walking, his posture relaxed but alert, his senses still engaged with the world in ways Daniel is only beginning to understand. And Daniel realizes that what happened tonight will not be written the way it truly unfolded. There will be no mention of hesitation, no record of a command not followed, only the outcome, the safe path taken, the mission continuing as planned. But Daniel will remember, not as a mistake, not as a risk, but as a moment where something unseen made itself known through the only voice it had, and that voice had 4 paws and did not speak. He reaches down briefly, letting his fingers brush against Rex's fur once more, a quiet acknowledgement that carries more meaning than any words he could say. And Rex does not react, does not need to, because the understanding is already there, shared, steady, and real. And as they move deeper into the night, Daniel Hayes no longer measures trust by obedience, but by something far more powerful, something that cannot be commanded, only chosen. Again and again, in silence the night stretches wide and quiet, wrapping the desert in a calm that feels earned rather than given. And Daniel Hayes walks forward with a steadiness that no longer comes from control alone, but from something deeper that has taken root inside him, something shaped in silence, something proven without words. Rex moves beside him with the same quiet certainty, his presence no longer just a part of the mission, but the reason it continues safely at all. The unit follows in a rhythm that has settled into trust, not blind, not forced, but real, built in the space between what they understand and what they have chosen to believe. The air is cooler now, brushing softly against their skin, carrying the faint scent of dust and distant earth, the kind of scent that lingers without urgency, without warning, just a reminder that the world continues quietly whether they notice it or not. Daniel glances once more at the path behind them, now lost in shadow, indistinguishable from the rest of the land. No sign of the line they never crossed, no evidence of the choice that changed everything, just darkness, still and convincing, and that is what stays with him, not what they avoided, but how easily it could have been missed, how close certainty came to leading them the wrong way. He exhales slowly, the breath steady, carrying with it the last weight of doubt, and in its place is something simpler, something clearer, trust that does not need explanation. Rex slows slightly, then comes to a natural stop, not out of warning this time, but because the moment itself has reached a quiet end. He stands there, calm, grounded, as if nothing extraordinary has happened, as if this is simply how things are meant to be. Daniel steps beside him and pauses, looking out over the open land ahead, the horizon barely visible now under the soft glow of distant stars, and for a moment, everything feels still in a way that does not carry tension, only peace, the kind of peace that follows understanding. Daniel lowers his hand and rests it gently against Rex once more, not as a signal, not as a command, but as a quiet acknowledgement of something that cannot be measured or trained, something that was revealed only because he chose to listen instead of insist. Rex remains still, accepting the contact without reaction, because he does not need recognition, he never did, he only needed to be trusted. Daniel's gaze softens slightly as he looks ahead again, and a thought settles into place, not loud, not dramatic, just certain. Maybe loyalty is not about following orders, maybe it never was, maybe it is about choosing to stay, choosing to guide, choosing to protect, even when no one understands why. The desert remains silent, but it no longer feels empty, it feels full of things unseen, things that move without sound, things that can only be known through trust. And as Daniel Hayes stands there beside Rex, he understands something he will never be able to put into a report, something that will never be written in training manuals or spoken in briefings, that sometimes the ones we believe are following us are the ones quietly leading us away from what we cannot see, and sometimes the difference between danger and safety is not skill, not experience, but the moment you choose to trust what has always been trying to guide you without words. And in that quiet understanding, the night carries them forward, not as soldiers moving through uncertainty, but as two souls walking in step with something deeper than either of them could explain, something steady, something unseen, something true. In the quiet stretch of a desert night, a U.S. Marine walks beside his German Shepherd K9, not knowing that a single moment of hesitation will redefine everything he believes about training, instinct, and loyalty. What begins as a routine mission slowly transforms into one of the most powerful animal stories ever told, where silence speaks louder than commands and trust becomes the only thing standing between safety and the unknown. The Marine, trained to lead with precision and discipline, faces an unexpected reality when his K9 refuses to follow an order, not out of disobedience, but from a deeper awareness that cannot be explained by manuals or drills. And in that moment, the bond between human and dog begins to reveal a truth far greater than training itself. As they move through the still desert, guided not by protocol but by instinct, the German Shepherd demonstrates a level of perception that challenges everything the Marine thought he understood, turning this journey into one of those unforgettable animal stories where unseen danger is avoided not by force, but by quiet intuition. The deeper they go, the more the Marine realizes that loyalty is not about blind obedience, but about choosing to protect, to guide, and to act even when no one else understands why. And that realization reshapes the way he sees his K9 partner, transforming their relationship into something stronger than command, something rooted in trust and shared awareness. This is not just one of many animal stories about bravery, but a cinematic exploration of the invisible connection between a Marine and his German Shepherd, where every step forward is guided by something that cannot be taught, only felt. Through subtle tension, emotional depth, and powerful storytelling, This journey stands out among animal stories as a reminder that sometimes the ones trained to follow are the ones who truly see the path ahead, and in choosing to trust that instinct, the Marine discovers a quiet miracle that changes everything. As the night deepens and the mission continues, what remains is not just a successful outcome, but a lasting understanding that true loyalty lives beyond commands, making this one of the most meaningful animal stories that will stay with you long after the final moment fades, where trust, instinct, and silent connection reveal a truth that words can never fully capture. Character 1, 34-year-old white male U.S. Marine Staff Sergeant, rugged face, short brown military haircut, light stubble, hazel eyes, wearing desert combat uniform and tactical vest. Dog tags visible, front-facing portrait, serious expression, natural lighting, realistic photography style, no cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. Character 2, 6-year-old German Shepherd K9, full body visible, strong athletic build, sable black and tan coat, alert upright ears, amber eyes, standing firm and focused, realistic proportions, natural outdoor lighting, highly detailed fur texture, no cartoon, no CGI, no illustration.